and that the UNHCR has already processed many of these peoples, and it is the additional Canadian screening slowing everything down because it cannot take place because we have no processing centers there. Best practices abroad, and this was brought to our attention from the representative from the UNHCR, that we could actually waive the Canadian processing process, and that, in fact, to expedite the arrivals of families, that we actually adopt that best practice in other jurisdictions. For family reunification cases in Canada, this additional level of screening only occurs if significant flags are raised. And so if advocating for the whole screening to be waived is not acceptable, then I would suggest that it apply only in cases where screening cannot be done and is creating such delays in that sense. For the LGBTQI community, there are estimated 63 countries in the world where they criminalize people based on their existence, that is, their sexual orientation and gender identity. This coded in law discrimination and vulnerability is different than that of vulnerability due to conflict. And in many cases, leaving the country in order to be able to make a refugee claim puts individuals in an even more vulnerable situation because they end up in another country that criminalizes them and they have no supports in that country. So by nature of them leaving, it could also put their families at risk. Providing a program similar to that of the source country class program, but more adaptable and responsive, would allow individuals to connect with Canadian NGOs to make claims in Canada or local groups on the ground while still in their country of origin. And that there are established groups, also human rights organizations who could assist in that regard. And that we recommend the creation of, I think, a subcommittee to continue to work on internally displaced persons for solutions in the future. So those are some of the thoughts that I have with respect to how we can move forward in the immediate sense, in addition to what my colleague, Ms. Rempel, has provided. And I wonder whether or not those are the items that you would support as well. I know that I'm running out of time,
point of order,
so
Mr.
a quick
Chair.
answer from all of you.
Cheeky point of order. I would like to echo our support of Ms. Kwan's recommendations.
I'm not sure that's a point of order, but...
So I said it was a cheeky one, Mr. Chair.
One thing the government can look at to speed up the Yazidi applications, they can bring them over here to Canada on a temporary visa and then go through the screening and then issue the permanent residency. That would be the best way to do it.
I agree with you. All the recommendations that have been read today is a wonderful recommendation. But it's a matter of action. It's one thing that we say that, yes, we agree with the recommendation. Is another thing if the government will listen to us or not.
Yes, I agree with everything you said. And just a couple of things that we've bumped into, like access to health care and the humanitarian aid, are huge issues in these refugee camps. And the fact that they are segregated. Through our project, Operation Ezra, one of the families that we're sponsoring, one of the ladies had a baby a few months ago, and she had her baby in the camp. And we had to send her money through Operation Ezra to get medical attention for her and for her baby, and to buy her baby clothing and blankets and etc. We've been through Operation Ezra. We're sending these families money to buy clothing, food, etc. To our two families that came, they required interviews, medicals, and we had to send them to Istanbul to get them on a plane. They were funded through Operation Ezra, whereas other refugee groups that were sponsored by the government, Canadian officials went into the camps to do the interviews and medicals and things like that.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss, very briefly. No?
Just 2 minutes, if I may, or 2 seconds.
Okay. 2 seconds is probably more likely.
A New York minute, then. The on-the-ground issue is really important because those people are being segregated and they're not getting the same attention that the Syrian refugees in the camps are. I also want to point out that there's 25,000, to our information, Yazidi refugees in Turkey. So looking at getting people out, quite frankly, that's the low-hanging fruit. They're accessible. We don't have to go into Syria to find them. Let's start there and start with people that we can get out in a hurry and get them to Canada, to safe haven. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Mr. Sarai, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. I want to commend all three groups, all four of you, for your great work. Some of you are refugees yourself and have been imprisoned, have survived some of the stuff, and the others have helped out a tremendous amount to hundreds of refugees. Mr. El Shafie, you have spoken passionately in public about the plight of the Yazidis. In my hand, I have a copy of your testimony before the subcommittee in 2014. You testified that you had led delegations to Iraq with parliamentarians such as Conservative MPs Brad Butt, Member of Parliament Russ Hebert, Member of Parliament Leon Benoit. You testified that with these MPs you visited a Yazidi refugee camp. In your very own testimony, you said what was happening to the Yazidis was a genocide. Yet none of your recommendations in that report, and your recommendations or in your statements, called for the Canadian government to resettle any Yazidi refugees. In fact, what you recommended at the time was that we cooperate with the Iraqi government and that we push other neighboring states to stop funding terrorism, but none of them ever called, despite seeing a genocide, that refugees should be brought, Yazidis should be brought here. Furthermore, none of the three members of parliament at the time, all three government members of parliament, either called it a genocide, nor did they ask for refugees to be brought to Canada or took any action in that regards. And in fact, now we've learned that only a car full, maybe 4 people from the Yazidi community actually ended up being refugees during that time. We also, you also called for more military intervention, but not resettlement. And yet you criticize this government for not bringing or enough Yazidis, yet there was no criticism of the past government whatsoever. So my question to you, can you tell us if you ever recommended bringing Yazidi refugees to Canada prior to this government coming in power?
You're talking about the first trip when the attacks on the Yazidi took place, when it was starting, and we were there in the very beginning. And one of our main concerns was we was hoping that the Kurdish region, we didn't know how they will deal with the refugees. So in the beginning, our first choice is always not to immigrate anybody, like leave them at home in their culture, in their environment. Will be my first choices, always. If you ask me, do I prefer to be here or in Egypt? Of course, my home country. This is not something that we'll disagree on it. But as the years goes by, and as we kept monitoring what's happening to the Yazidis on the ground, we discovered amount of corruption, we discovered amount of discrimination, which is lead us that their life there, even in Kurdistan, will not be easy, will not be safe, will not be secure. The stigma on these girls when they return back, we was hoping that they will be treated as victims, they will receive the proper health care, mental health care. Sadly, this didn't happen on the ground. So in the beginning, we was definitely hoping that we can work with the Kurdish community on the ground and in order to improve their life and their situation and rescuing them. When this didn't happen, and we kept monitoring the situation years after years, we found that the immigrating them have to be part of the solution. So this is number one.
But you witnessed a genocide. You saw women raped, men murdered, being trained. It was the worst atrocity happening at the time. You firsthand saw it with members of parliament. You thought that it was okay to just leave them in camps at the time, that there was no need to bring them to a safe haven at all. There was no cry for help at that time. I would assume if I saw that would be one of the most passionate and compassionate moments of my life where you would want to bring them right away. But you felt more about working with the Iraqi government, and not once until late 2015 or early 2016 ever brought up that we should bring Yazidis or they're not being brought to Canada.
Before you use my report against me, I will ask you, did you been there before? Did you see the situation yourself? You didn't been there. Okay. I've been there. So when this has happened, once again, we was hoping through the Kurdish community that we will be able to have a stable life for them. So we brought medication. We start a project.
Not your recommendations.
Well, I have to respond back to you.
But they were not
though.
your recommendations.
I'm sorry, but I just have to respond back to you, if you
I
don't
think
mind.
I've gotten your response. My next question is...
No, I cannot answer your next question unless you
I'm not
allow me
asking
to
you the next
respond back
question.
to
I'm
you.
asking the
Another
other
part of your question, sir. You said that I never went to the previous government and criticized them for the Yazidi situation. I presented my proposal to Minister Chris Alexander twice before the election, 2 months before the election. So I went to the previous government and I gave them the same proposal, and I was working with them in an order from them to bring the Yazidi girls here. That's in the previous government. Two months later, the election happened.
But I'm saying you never critiqued them or never had any problem with the fact that they took no action.
Because they approve it. They approve our proposal.
My next question is for
Minister Chris
Mr.
Alexander
Weiss
approve our
or
proposal.
Ms. Nasso, and I have a shortage of time, so I have to ask my questions. You have received now 41 Yazidi families, members of Yazidi families, am I right, or
We're
close?
sponsoring 7 families, but we've only received 2 families, a total of 9 people.
9 people, and the remaining are in process?
Yes.
Okay. And I just came to hear from Mr. Weiss that there are you know of no other privately sponsored Yazidi applications in the process? Do you know of any sponsorship agreement holders applying for any Yazidi refugees?
As far as we know, based on the comments and the questions we've had from across the country, we are the only organized group that is focused on sponsoring privately sponsored Yazidi families in Canada, maybe in North America.
And so it's not a government stallback by any means. It's just there hasn't been any sponsorship holder that has applied for any Yazidi families to come into Canada.
Well, I'd like to qualify that by saying we would apply for a lot more, and I know that our community would put up more money if we could find quota to bring more families in. But
No, I appreciate your work. Don't get me wrong. I'm just asking. But there's been no others, and nobody else has applied for these.
Not as far as we know.
My second question.
Thank you. The time is up. Mr. Soroya, and I understand you'll be splitting your time with Ms. Gallant?
Yes.
Thank you. 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, thank you, everybody, commending your work, all of you going out of the way, doing all the work for yourself and all the Canadians. My question is for Mr. Alves, is you mentioned Karen Bennett's name, what her announcement, what she... those stuff she talked with the Indigenous people, it doesn't apply to the Canadians. What are we talking about?
The commitment that Canada made on protecting Indigenous people, according to the United Nations, it applies to all Indigenous people, not only the Canadian First Nations. So now Canada is committed to protect all Indigenous people across the world. And Yazidis, in addition to the Chaldeans, Assyrians, Syriacs, are the indigenous people of Iraq.
No, okay, I understand. My next question is for Mr. Majed. You're talking about creating a green zone for the minorities, creating a green zone for the minorities. How do we create the green zone for the minorities when we talk about I'm assuming we are talking about we are protecting the Yazidi people as well as the Christian in Iraq or Syria. How do we create the green zone?
Well, the green zone came upon the request from the refugees themselves. Once again, many of the internally displaced personnel, they don't want to leave their home. There is nobody want to leave his home. So some of them, they found that their life there is absolutely impossible at this point. They have a stigma upon them. They are persecuted. Their persecutions does not stop. The Kurds unable to protect them. The Iraqi soldiers unable to protect them. The Shia militias within the Iraqi army is not protecting them. So the idea came of the immigration option, or to have a green zones where the refugees can be protected if they choose to stay in their homeland. But if they choose to leave, they are free to request to be refugees.
In your mind, you think Yazidis or the Christians or any other minorities, they can live peace and harmony in Iran or Syria? You think they can ever live in a peace and harmony?
Right now, I would say that I will doubt that they can live in absolute peace or harmony, because with the Kurdish troops and their agendas, with Iraqi soldiers and their agendas, the Shias militias, and with the Sunni groups, I would say that a lot of the minorities that does not have Shia militias to protect them, does not have militias to protect them, they will be always a target, even if we defeated ISIS, even if we defeated another extremist groups, they will always be a target because they are different, because they are minority. But these green zones that I was talking about is under international protection, not local protection.
Cheryl, you have the next one.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, through you. Mr. El Shafie, the former Immigration Minister, Chris Alexander, had approved your proposal, and the process was going forward until the door was slammed shut at the election?
That's correct. I had 2 meetings with Minister Chris Alexander. I have 1 meeting in Ottawa with his department. We presented the proposal. They liked the proposal. I recall the wording of Minister Chris Alexander. He said, we have to do this. We have to save these people. And that was 2 months before the election. After the election is over, we had to start from the beginning.
So is it more difficult or time-consuming to process Yazidis than other refugees?
I think the main problem, once again, there was no vehicle or there was no system to process intern displaced personnel. I think they have to find the mechanism. And 2 months before the election, once the election hit the ground, the election was the focus.
Okay, so you mentioned the stigma against them. Are there Canadian immigration officials on the ground in Turkey who would be sharing that sort of stigma? Why would they not get through the system when people displaced from other countries situated in Turkey are being able to come through?
10 seconds, please.
The stigma that they are victims, they are different. As Daphne said, they are devil. That is how they see them, as a devil worshipper, which is cause that they've been discriminated against in everywhere they went. They are different, and that's really what is caused this stigma. Besides, if you are a victim of rape, all of the society will look at you differently in the Middle East.
Thank you. Mr. Tabara, 5 minutes, please.
Okay, my first question is to Mr. El Shafie. Just if we can get a hard copy of that proposal that you gave to Chris Alexander, and
It's in front of you. It's the same proposal, sir.
Okay, and then it's the same proposal that you
It's
gave
the same
to Chris?
proposal.
Okay.
We just enhanced it in the end of June, but it's the same essence.
Okay, I'm just going to give Mr. Assassi just 1 minute just to finish his last question.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up. I just wanted to emphasize once again that I very much applaud your concern about the Yazidis, but of course, I think we should be concerned about the means that are used. This is a very vulnerable population, and it is incumbent upon us to actually proceed in our attempts to help in a very responsible fashion. One of the reasons I did bring it up is I did see an interview that you conducted back in 2011 in which obviously in your keen interest to get things done, I think sometimes you are skirting around things, legal means of getting things done. I have an interview here with
Can you repeat the last statement?
Yes, I have an interview here that you conducted with the Christian Telegraph in 2011.
Yes.
In which, on 2 occasions, you have admitted to actually engaging in bribery when you are trying to undertake operations abroad.
Absolutely, yes. That's correct.
And do you now understand why I just am very much concerned about making sure that, given the sensitive nature of the mission that you have in mind, that your safety and the safety of those that you...
When we are talking about risking Yazidi gears, when we are talking about risking many of the minorities from ISIS territory, we are not dealing with Canadian officials. We are not dealing within a system that respect the law. in an order to save these girls, in an order to rescue them, sometimes we have to use other means in an order to get them out as soon as possible for their safety and their security. If this is your daughter, or this is your sister or your wife, you would do everything means in an order to get them out safe and sound.
Thank you. The remainder of the time I would like to share with Mr. Virani.
Oh, no, it's me.
Oh, is it you? Sorry.
Mr. Tabara.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for the witnesses for being here. Operation Ezra has welcomed its first family of sponsored refugees last week, and the government has made great commitments to welcoming the Syrian refugees, and there are many Canadians that are here eager to help. My one question was to Mr. West. You mentioned that private sponsorship is limited and there's too many obstacles, complicated, significant wait times. That's one of the main things that the minister is working on is processing times, which is increased dramatically. And his number one priority is to reduce wait times. So if you can just elaborate on some of the obstacles that you've experienced.
I perhaps can give you a case study of the families that my synagogue is sponsoring through Operation Ezra. We filled out the papers in November of last year, and they were approved in terms of the content being correct in December. We just received notification that that process is beginning now, and they haven't had medical or interviews yet. They're living in a refugee camp in Turkey in a situation that is very unstable. And realistically, based on our experience with the family just arrived, we probably won't see these folks until late 2016 or 2017. Under a normal private sponsorship refugee program, that's probably not so bad to get access to a country like Canada. But where people are living in constant danger, where they don't have medical supplies, they don't have access to services, where in fact Canadian officials aren't even coming into the refugee camps, it's not acceptable.
Well, with cuts previously by the previous government to this department, this is why we're having such increase of wait times. I mean, the department needs to be funded properly to reduce this wait time. But you mentioned also the hybrid program. Could you elaborate more on that and just give the committee members more detail on the hybrid program that you proposed?
In essence, and it's very, very, we're at a point now where we're looking at it conceptually, so we haven't drilled down to, but the concept is we have the volunteers. We have volunteers and people who are knowledgeable and experienced in terms of settlement and helping these folks and their families after their arrival. Also, particularly in Winnipeg, we're very, very fortunate. We have an established Yazidi community of approximately 200 people who are very, very welcoming to other Yazidi families coming here. So we have a good support system. Where our problem is that the frustration of waiting the length of time in comparison to, and I'm not saying instead of, but I'm saying in comparison to the speed that we were able to bring in 25,000 Syrians. And the fact is, we have brought into Canada, in the last over a year, 9 people. That's it.
Thank you. I'd like to thank, I'm sorry, but the time is up. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for the tremendous work that all of you are engaged in and continue to do. Thank you for bringing your insights to this committee. And at this point, the committee will adjourn.